Okay, I got a special live stream. I just recently got a copy of my Frank Miller's Ronin Gallery Edition. And you guys know how I do this. It's the live opening, so we're going to open it right here, right now. Go ahead and take it out of the box. The box was damaged, but I knew that. And I did go ahead and make a start in the plastic so that you don't have to watch me fumble with that. But we're going to put it right here. And we're going to flip through this bad boy. Hey, let's put a little more light on the subject while we're at it. And I got a pretty good deal on this. It's been out for about 10 years. And I've wanted one for a while. So, I splurged. This sucker is thick. Hey, John Norton. How you doing, man? Good to see you around here. Yeah, this is one of my favorite books. I wanted one of these since before they had it. Yeah, I wanted one of these since I was like 15. Yeah. But they didn't have anything as artist editions. Yeah, you caught the live stream for once. For once, the live stream was not a stealth live stream. Sometimes I will do a private live stream with no sound and then take that video, stick music over it, and just use it as a video. That way I could focus on inking, getting work done. And people get to watch the actual pen and ink on paper, which seems to be the preferred thing. I mean, people like digital inking, okay, but they want to see you use the real thing. At least that's what I hear a lot of. It is hard to draw live and pay attention to chat. It's a little easier to ink. For some reason, it's not quite so right brain fighting the left brain, for whatever reason. But yeah. Anyway, without further ado, we're going to open this bad boy up. I cannot believe how big this thing is, okay? First of all, for anybody that knows Ronin, this contains the entire 6-issue miniseries. Look at how thick this book is. That's got to be, well, let's see, I got a ruler. This book is a full inch and a half thick. Hey, D-Man, what's going on? Take a look at my Ronin Gallery Edition. I just popped it open. Just busted the plastic on it. And now we're going to flip through this bad boy. I had to put my camera, put the tripod up on a box and raise the tripod as high as it would go because this book is like 20 by 13. It is enormous. So in order to get the book in frame, I had to set up a little differently than normal. Got an introduction by Dave Gibbons. It's cool. I'll have to read that at some point. Now, this is the cover to the first issue of Ronin, and it is not scanned from the original art. It means it's a photo stat or something like this, but it's still real crisp. You still get to look at the lines as they were on the original art. And I've been in love with this cover since I was about 15. I just thought this was too cool. The whole first issue, in fact, I thought was really cool. Some of the ink experiments he got into after that, um, you got a little hit and miss, you know. Mm, okay. So anyway, um, this first issue is my favorite, and this is drawn on standard DC Comics stock, 11 by 17. Um, and like I said, I really the first issue is my favorite. He was getting into Lone Wolf and Cub. Lone Wolf and Cub very much had this cross-hatchy sort of style to it, and he was trying to bring some of the aesthetic over to this project to make it look distinctly different from what he had done on Daredevil just prior to this. But yeah, this I'm glad I got this already. Wow. Cool, cool, cool. This is duo shade paper. Up here you see me doing effects on Rob Norton's stuff. Look, like that kind of thing. I love that duo shade look. Here too. Tell you the truth, I really don't care for the way duo shade looks on the original board. I like it better when it's printed and it's black and white rather than this sort of ambery brown kind of chemical look that it's got on the original board. So I was well into my professional career before I saw a piece done on that duo shade paper and saw what those chemicals did to the paper itself, how yellowed it made it. I'm not sure if it's because it's such a big book or what. The binding seems a little weird as I turn these pages. Hopefully I don't have any issues. I really, really love this stuff. I just bought this book again, the collected edition of it again, like 2 years ago, because the collected edition I had from the early 90s was getting so beat up. It was like, okay, it's time to replace this. So, all right, I'm gonna have to flip a little faster. I don't want to give away the whole store, and I don't want this video to take so long. I can look at this whenever I want to at this point, but you guys have got other things to do. Sure. Wow. I love this stuff. When it's all come together, bionics and stuff like this. Now these are shapes. Most people don't realize this, but like it's just stuff. The way the shape of the fingertips and some of the rest of this stuff, right out and drawing from life, and he's just made it into mechanical robot parts. Hey, someone's saying what's going on. The guy stabbing himself and someone behind him. Yes, Rob Liefeld did steal that shot from Frank Miller. This is from like 81 or 82. This is the shot you're talking about. Yeah, he absolutely stole that. in X Force One. Spoilers here. I'm going to give away a little bit of the story. There's a futuristic story, and there's a medieval feudal Japan era sort of setup, and it goes back and forth between the two of them. And basically, Ronin has this magic sword that he got when this demon killed his master. Uh, Being that he was his master's samurai, his protector, he's bound to avenge him. Uh, so he takes the magic sword that can kill the demon, but the demon has to have the blood of an innocent in order to have the power to kill the demon. And in the climactic scene of the first issue, he rams the sword through himself rather than killing someone else as an innocent and through the demon at the same time. But you can see here that the demon says that he's got one more curse, you know. Uh, so rather than dying, the story continues on. But that is probably the climactic scene of that first issue. And you can tell from this crosshatchy artwork, honestly, I believe that this book is the inspiration for Jim Lee, for Rob Liefeld, for anybody else that was using this crosshatchy, what came to be known as the image look. They got that from looking at this. In between this and like Barry Windsor Smith's Weapon X, which also used a lot of crosshatching, and see Brian Bolland's Camelot 3000 was coming out at that era, had a great deal of crosshatching, inked by Terry Austin and looking very clean like that. I think a lot of that stuff influenced the entire image look, but Ronin in particular, this line work and this, yeah, absolutely, he ripped it off. Yeah, yeah, John. Not only did Liefeld rip this off, he ripped it off about 10 years after it was originally done. Um, Great stuff. And this first issue has a lot of this kind of cross hatching and stuff in it. You see very much the Jim Lee kind of things that were later that are very obviously, okay, well, Scott Williams is inking it with a different hand, but he knows what Jim's trying to do when he's doing that, and he's thinking the same thing. You know, I think Scott Williams was very much influenced by this stuff as well. This is the cover for issue 2. And this is where he starts to get into some rendering that I don't care for quite as much. Rather than doing the cross hatching, he's doing like these little bitty tick marks, very Mobius inspired kind of stuff. And I'm about to say something that is sacrilege to people. People don't understand this with me when I say this. There are some artists that are revered in the industry, absolutely revered and just adored by people that I look at their stuff and it just leaves me cold. Absolutely cannot see the. And Mobius is one of those guys. I don't really care for it. Just not my cup of tea. I understand it really sends some people. Um, there's a few guys like that. It's like you bring them up, and I'm just like, yeah, I understand lots of people like him. I understand lots of people think it's really awesome. I just could care less. But anyway, yeah, he gets into this Mobius style, and you'll notice that from Ronin 2 on, uh, the first issue of Ronin, most of it is done at 11 by 17. So we've got a good border around these pages. Um, when we get into issue 2, it's all the way up. More Jewish paper. Yeah, everybody's got their own taste. And when I say I don't really care for an artist's work, that's not necessarily universal. There are some pieces that I've seen of Mobius's that I think are very impressive, and I certainly have an appreciation for the knowledge that he has and the work he's done. It's just not my favorite. I have similar sorts of feelings with a lot of Alex Toth's work too. I, I really like what Alex Toth did in terms of the animation design work that I've seen. Um, but I'm not crazy about his comics work. Frank Miller describes this series as the book that he did to teach himself how to ink, because up to this point, he'd been very much inking by other folks. He had done some things, but had never really tackled a large project like this by himself, professionally anyway. Yeah, see, I'm really not crazy about stuff like that. I'm like, you can hire an assistant or take the time to actually do stick marks on the wall. You don't have to like just scribble it out. He's experimenting. He's trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And like a smart creator, he's found a company to pay him for his experimentation. I don't think DC regrets paying for this one. Some of the others that came later might have bothered them because, boy, I tell you, Frank was really pushing the limits of minimalism on some of these things later. That's pretty cool stuff. It reminds me very much of Barry Windsor Smith. I saw him doing in the Weapon X stuff. I wonder what he's inking some of this with. I think some of it is a parallel pen. I don't know if you guys know what a parallel pen is. It's like basically like has a tip that kind of looks like a really fine bladed regular screwdriver, kind of. You dip it in the ink and it gives you thin lines one way and really broad lines the other way because it's fat like a screwdriver. I don't know. I think he's really just experimenting with different techniques, styles, things like this. Flip past some of this stuff a little faster. Yeah, if you've never read the Ronin series and you're like on the fence about getting this, you're like, well, I don't know if I'm gonna like it. Do I really want? Personally, I think this is no insult at all to Lynn Varney, to Lynn Varley, rather to her colors, but I really prefer it in this black and white. Savage sort of Conan, that sort of thing was pretty normal. Yeah, these are the sorts of lines you would get out of like Ernie Chan, which I wasn't always crazy about either. uh, yeah, I was a Terry Austin guy. I cut my teeth on that. So the cleaner and neater it was, the better I usually liked it at that time. Now, uh, my taste has shifted a little bit. Man, I love this page. That is just so cool. This is nice too. This little bottom vignette. Very cool. Um, very, very cool. The cover to book 3, again, not scanned from the original art. I can imagine, like, man, I would imagine that Frank probably sold these pieces like at that time, okay? And thinking about the art market in the early 80s like this, somebody probably took that cover home for less than 200 bucks, maybe 3 at the outside, I'm guessing. And that's probably way overinflated. John Byrne was selling Byrne and Austin X-Men pages back in the day for like 50 bucks a piece. A lot of people don't like John Romita Jr.'s art, but you don't mind it. It depends on what era of John Romita Jr. you're talking about. You know, there's some eras I like better than others. Um, I was a big fan of his early on, and I thought his X Men was pretty good. I kept wanting them to get him a better inker. Put him on Iron Man first, and they had Bob Layton inking him, which was one of my favorite at that time. One of my main inking influences, along with Terry Austin. I liked that very clean Bob Layton look, especially the way he rendered metal. Um, so I was very influenced by that. But when he left Iron Man and went on to Spider Man, they kept pairing him up with guys, what I used to refer to as the thick and chunky inkers. Like guys like Jim Mooney and Frank Giacoya, and guys that like to use the side of their brush quite a bit. And that just was not what I was into at the time. This is too much. You've got the same going on here as you have going on the arm. And because there's no variation in line weight anywhere to show you any shadow or anything, in black and white, this more or less blends all together. Your eye just gray. And the lines that he's using here with these curly lines, I'm not really sure what that represents. It doesn't look like hair. It doesn't look like texture. It just looks like lazy shading to me. Um, I like the cross hatching stuff much better. I think it's way more effective. But that's just me. You will hear me from time to time as we go through this book, moan and groan about this book, because the same things I've moaned and groaned about for 40 years since it came out. Wow. He doesn't stick to one thing, though. That's the nice thing I like about it. Is there's so many experimental looks going all over the place. Really stretching to figure out what he wants to do with ink. Yeah, again, the same thing. The texture for that words is just not working for me at all. I liked the work on Daredevil, and I liked Uncanny X Men. I thought that at the time, I would have liked someone else other than Dan Green. I would have liked Bob Layton in there or Terry Austin, um, or somebody like that. Somebody with a cleaner line than Dan Green's. But at that time, too, I also didn't understand. I was like 13, 14 years old when this stuff's coming out, and I didn't understand that. Page. Yeah, there we go on the vellum. At that time, I didn't. It didn't click in my head that somebody actually had to sit down and draw this stuff and produce the work, and how much time that should take. The time that I thought that Terry Austin should ink everything in the Marvel line, because again, considerations of how much time it takes to produce this material wasn't something that was on my mind back then. It was just like, oh, this guy's the best one. They should get him to do all of it. The work on Daredevil was incredible. I wish we had an artist edition of that stuff, uh, just so that we could get a good look at Al Williams' inks. Um, that's something I wish somebody would grab a hold of the idea of. Like, yeah, you liked Alfredo Alcala's inks on Conan. I liked Alfredo Alcala's inks on Conan too. When he would ink, because half the time you could kind of flip a coin, and Alfredo Alcala was he would either ink, and he would use that very meticulous brush style of his, or he would get out his Conte crayon and do the whole thing like shaded like it was done in charcoal or something. I preferred the ink look more so. Um, that's really cool. I just got the depth working in this. Some hands have line work in them, and some hands are blank to pop out from the hands that have line work in them. And he just layers them. Yeah, you like the inks better too. Yeah. From what I understand, that guy was amazingly fast too. Like he wasn't terribly sensitive to someone's pencils. Like when he inks it, it's gonna look like Alfredo Alcala when it's done, and that's just all there is to it. So if you don't like that style, you're probably not gonna like that book. you know. But on the other hand, know, you get a new penciler who's green and doesn't know what he's doing and turns in a page full of fucking stick figures. Hey, on to Alfredo Alcala, and it's gonna look fine. No problem. No difference between that and any other brand page that the guy inked. Same thing with Tony De Zuniga. You put Tony De Zuniga on it, it doesn't matter who penciled it, it's gonna look like Tony De Zuniga. It really doesn't matter who we get. For a long time, that kind of inker was very much valued because they wanted to keep the look of the title consistent. Um, and when you're playing find a new penciler, sometimes you'll try out three or four guys. Well, Sometimes those new guys draw the book and it looks like, well, you can't put it out like that. So you send it over to Tony De Zuniga or to Alfredo Alcala, and he's gonna come in and do. They're gonna come in and do what they do, and it's not gonna matter what the first guy did. It doesn't matter how awful it is. We covered issue 4. This sort of tic-tac-toe rendering, is what I call it. We're gonna play some tic-tac-toe on a large, large scale. Never did nibs though. Cho uses ballpoints sometimes. I use ballpoints sometimes too. Um, with ballpoints, the thing that you have to remember as an inker is what we call a dead line. Okay, very much like the dead lines that are going on back here. All very much the same thickness, all very much the same weight, all very much the same tonal value all over it. Okay, those are dead lines. These are not dead lines because we have variation going on from these brush lines. Okay, some of this over here gets a little dead, some of this over here gets a little dead, but he is creating tonal values with it by using stippling techniques, getting the lines closer together and further away from each other, things like this. Just really experimenting. A ballpoint pen will give you a deadline like this, and there's a reason why you would have a deadline like this, a dead weight line like this. For example, if we wanted to pop some certain things out, I'm going to give a little free inking clinic here. If we wanted to pop some things out, I'm going to take the bottoms of some of these objects. Everywhere there's an underneath, right there, that line's going to be thicker. Here underneath these pipes and stuff, the underside is going to be thicker, okay? Because the light's going to be hitting it from above, and that's going to be shadow underneath. And this gives you sort of a shortcut cipher to do that. One of the first things you should do is determine some sort of light source for your panel and stick with it, okay? In this panel, you're going to have a light source coming. The main light source is coming from above and from this direction, okay? Which is why it's going to shadow in this indentation. And it's why it's going to give this cast shadow on most of Ronin's body right here. There is some ambient light and things going on though, because if it was just stuff in this direction, it would look all Sin City. It would be like solid black right here and it's white. Don't know if ballpoints have longevity though. Well, people have been using ballpoint pens since like the 50s or 60s, somewhere in there at least. And all those documents are still readable. The problem that you have with ballpoints, that you're going to have with ballpoints, is that most of the time, the correction fluid that you're going to be using is going to be something like Pro White, which is a gouache paint. It's water-based. Now, that ink that's inside those ballpoint pens, that is an oil-based ink. So, if you make a mistake with that oil-based ink, you will not be able to take your water-based white and brush over it and correct that mistake. You'll have to resort to something like that. A whiteout pen, or the other one that I like is it's the one that Jim Lee uses. It's the same thing. It's the Presto correction pen. But yeah, basically whiteout fluid. You're a kid, you used microns for everything. Well, that's something that you have to do if you're dealing with a pen that doesn't have any flex to it or has very little flex to it. and you can't get a lot of variation in line weight in terms of thicknesses and things like this, then you're going to have to do what you refer to, what inkers refer to as sculpting the line. You have to go back over it again and thicken it up again a little bit, but you want to do it in such a way that you threw that line down just right the first time. You want to look looking all jagged and fucked up. Unless everything looks all jagged and fucked up, then it'll fit in. See, I don't like the inks on these pages at all. Everything's the same. Like part of the sleeve should have a line weight on the side of it. The bottom of this finger should probably have a thicker line on the bottom of it. He's leaning on color a lot, which, granted, he's living with the colorist at the time. The two of them are communicating hand in glove, and you can get away with a lot of that. But for me, I like to make it a little more idiot proof in case the colorist is an idiot. Nice stuff. She's like I'm liking this again. It's weird. I was really not digging this a few pages ago, and now we're into. It's like it starts using blacks and doesn't use the same damn line for everything. Now I'm interested again. See, and here we get into the same rendering line for everything, and everything's the same thickness. And now my eye glides right over the surface of the page and doesn't stop anywhere on there because there's nothing to hold the eye. Love that. You see the beginnings of what would become the Sin City look in some of this. You can also see, I get this. You guys are going to dig this. Let me see if I can pick this up and put it. All right. Do you see the little wiggly line underneath the shadow on his chest? Right here. Stuff like that is the beginning of what inkers call the Scott Williams wiggle that everybody was into in the 90s. Otherwise known in the olden days as fish hooking. It was strongly discouraged, considered an amateurish technique. And then the 90s came and everybody was doing it. I love this stuff so much. Wow. We are starting to get into some Sin City stuff, and later on there are definitely some panels where, like, dude, that could be right out of Sin City. Some of this stuff is really getting there. This too, you know, that very first Sin City story still had some lines in it. It wasn't all just strictly black and white. It did have a few ink lines left going on in it, and it reminds me of some of this. Stuff done on vellum with zipatones. Looks like some of it might be hand drawn. This looks like it might be hand drawn. I don't know. I'm tired, so I'm just going to scribble these shadows. Again, he's experimenting, and also too. Come on, let's be real. Uh, Daredevil sold through the roof. He was one of the hottest artists walking the planet at that time. And if there was anybody that could probably go to Marvel or DC and just make outrageous demands and have them cheerfully met, it would be a guy like Frank Miller during this era, or John Byrne during this era. Those guys are going to walk in and they're going to go, "What do you need from us to make this happen? We're ready." So he knew he could get away with a lot. And also, the executive editor at the time that this was done, still Dick Giordano, not just another artist, but an inker in particular. He's going to have an appreciation for what's going on here and for what he sees, for the experimentation. And he's going to see, like, he's working it out. But what he's doing is still bold and innovative work. That's the thing is like people look at this now and it looks different. It does stand out. I love that shot. I think that's my favorite shot out of the whole book. This guy in particular. Just the way he's holding the arrows and the bow in the same hand, and all these. Wow, too cool, too cool. 15-year-old me is just geeking out right now in my head. Wow. And other stuff that you do when you're inking your own stuff that you don't do when you're inking other people's stuff. See this gigantic patch of white here, where he's like basically drawn a whole nother panel and then just whited out the whole thing. If you are a professional inker, if you are a professional inker and you do that, I promise you, you will be fired. You'll be fired because the penciler will complain to the editor. Well, wait, you might not be fired. You might not be fired if you're doing it on Blue Line, because my understanding is that are inking stuff on Blue Line like that, they keep the Blue Line work. So if this white's all over the page that you're trying to sell, no problem. Nobody's going to have an issue. But if these are pages that are going to be split between a penciler and the inker, and a penciler winds up with a page like this, he's going to have you fired. He's going to have you fired. Because to a lot of art collectors, they don't white. They see this white and it automatically disqualifies the page. Unless it is stuff done for effect like this. You're trying to cut a highlight out in that shadow. But for just straight corrections like this, we're like, oops, I spilled ink right there and I got to cover this up. You got a great big patch of white there. You probably ain't going to sell that page. And the pencilers will get pissed and the editors will hear about it. And the next thing you know, there's another inker on that book. Not scanned from the original art. Not scanned from the original art. But most of this book is. And like I said, if you've never read this story, that's the nice thing is it's old days stuff, right? So all the lettering is on the board. You can read this story this way, no problem. All the pages are there. You can read the whole thing, start to finish, in this format. And honestly, I've seen this all kinds of different ways. Again, no disrespect to Lynn Varley, but you could have sold me a version like this back in 1982. You wouldn't even had to print it this big. Just a regular hardback book. I would have been happy with that. I like that Batman Noir format they were using it a few years ago, like basically like letter size paper book. And yeah, yeah, Eric July, huh? Never get tired of that dude. I don't have any thoughts on Eric July. I'm not sure Eric July has any thoughts on Eric July. I did hear about that thing that he did, though, where he shipped out his book of misprints called The Creative. Like, whatever, dude. I was born at night, but not last night, motherfucker. Get real. It's a creative decision to call it a creative decision and to try and pawn it off as something that you did intentionally. That's pretty creative. I don't think anybody's buying it, but yeah, that's some creative bullshit. Wow, I love that. Well, God bless the guy. He's over there doing what he's trying to do and trying to make it happen and this and that. And it's not easy to get something new off the ground like that. I do see him surrounding himself with some talented folks, though, which is a good start. I mean, every company starts off a little rocky. You look at the first couple years of Image, and I'm not even talking about story, what story content. There's a story to these damn things. I thought it was just a book full of a bunch of pinups. Some of them are not full page pinups. But yeah, oh, I love this page. I always love this. You get that Bernie Wrightson Frankenstein vibe going on to it or something. Very cool. Which also would have been something that Miller would have seen around that time. That also came out around that period. Yeah, yeah, he's got Chuck Dixon working for him. It's a funny story, man. Well, that was funny to me kind of at the time, but it was sort of a view inside the inner workings a little bit. Towards the end of my time at Wildstorm, uh, I moved to Colorado and was working with them on a freelance basis from there. And they were kind of cooling things off because the industry was on its downturn. They're about to sell stuff to DC and they're cutting titles and this and that. And everybody's hungry for work. And so one day I find out that there's a new editor on some book over at Wildstorm. And I'm thinking, okay, well, this editor doesn't know me. I'll call, introduce myself, and hit him up for work, right? So I call the office, and the receptionist answers the phone, and I tell her who I am, and she's like, one moment, and puts me on hold while she tells this editor that it's me on the phone. He pops on the phone, and again, I don't know this guy. I've never talked to him before. He pops on the phone, and he goes, Chuck, how you doing? Blah blah blah, and he's all happy and familiar and happy to talk to me and everything else. Now, this was a very different time too for Chuck Dixon as well. Um, But once he asked me if I wanted to write a proposal, if I wanted to write a proposal for some book that he was doing. I forget what it was, but I said, not sure. Maybe there's some sort of miscommunication. I'm an inker. And I mean, I can write some. I got probably write you a proposal, but it's not usually what I do. And that's when it got cleared up that I was Chuck Gibson, not Chuck Dixon. Now he was very sheepish and very, seemed like he was kind of embarrassed. And I sort of wrapped the conversation up after like that because I was kind of embarrassed too. But it was interesting because uh, at the time, Chuck Dixon was an A-lister. Okay, Chuck Dixon's one of those guys that could have called up Marvel, DC, Wildstorm, or anywhere else that he wanted to, and probably could have landed some work. No fuss, no muss, no sweat. And whereas I had editors that were kind of ducking my calls, trying to find inking work, uh, real warm embrace for the phone for Chuck Dixon. I'm like, oh, okay. It was nice to see how the A-listers treated for a minute. You'd rather read this than watch the Shogun miniseries from last year? I didn't watch the Shogun miniseries. I'm really, I don't know, I'm sort of 50-50 about the story on this one. I really wanted it to stay in feudal Japan. I was like, what's all this crap in the future? I wanted, give me some ninjas. Give me ninjas, Frank Miller. You know that's what I'm here for. So, and there were limited ninjas. So, what are you gonna do? Some of this starts to get very much into image rendering. You start to look at some of it, and you're going, I see spots where you're looking at it. You're doing this, and you're trying to get some of that flavor, that mojo. Cannot believe how huge this thing is. Now, I got a deal on this, okay? So, anybody that's thinking about buying one of these, I'm going to turn you on to it because the guy was real cool to me. Kind of stuck together there. Okay, it's been colored after the fact. The guy was really good to me in terms of like I got a good deal on it, and when I thought this might be lost in the mail, he was real responsive to it. I'm going to give a shout out to eBay seller Torpedo Comics, who hooked me up with this, and probably last time I looked, still had 4 or 5 copies of it, brand new, wrapped just like this. It's listed as like new, and I'll tell you why I think it's listed as like new, because it was wrapped in the book's perfect, right? But the storage box that this thing comes in, you see it's kind of rumpled, and the illustrated plate on it, it's got like a nick taken out of Frank Miller's name there that I think is unintentional. I'm not sure. But because of small cosmetic damage like that, I got a really good price on this sucker. I was seeing copies of this going for twice as much as I paid for it from that Torpedo Comics guy, and some of those were already open. Frank Miller doing a TMNT comic. It's funny that you would bring that up because Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was directly inspired by this work. That's why you see the duo shade work in the first issue of TMNT. It's why you see all this cross hatching stuff going on. It very much into the popular things at the time. Chris Claremont had just started uh, uh, New Mutants, a group of teenage mutants. Okay. Frank Miller was doing ninjas all over the place. And then they also had over at DC, they had Captain Carrot and his Zoo Crew, which was an funny animal comic that was very much an unexpected hit for them. So all they did, my understanding of the way that whole thing went down, is like sitting around goofing off, hanging out, and they decided, let's just take all the individual elements that are popular in comics right now and compile them into one book. And goofing off, they came up with, they're sitting there goofing off and joked and came up with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And then one of the guys still goofing off does a drawing of the turtles, and all of a sudden you're off to the races. But we would not have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the form that we got it without this book. Wouldn't have it. Wouldn't exist. Not in that form. Not looking like that. And maybe not at all. This is showing a couple extras. It's like for a fanzine called Anything Goes from '86. And this in unfinished early version from book one of a page. But yeah, that's the end of the story right there. You can tell that's gonna bug me. This fold out and already give me grief. But oh well, it is what it is. But yeah, there you have it. Frank Miller's Ronin, the Gallery Edition. I cannot get over how thick this book is. Most artist edition books are about 160 pages most of the time, 160, 165. This sucker is well over 300 pages. Cannot believe. I mean, yeah, it's a little heavy to wield, but it's nice to know that if somebody breaks into my house in the middle of the night, I have something handy to bludgeon them to death, because you certainly could with one of these. Anyway, I guess that's it for today. I'm coming into about an hour, and we flipped through the whole thing. So I guess I'm going to call off this live for now. I appreciate you joining me and hanging out to look at it. All right. Have a good one. Someone saying we'll see you later. Everybody else too, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Bye.